I'm Jacob Courtwright, and this is The Locker Room. What's going on, everybody? Welcome into The Locker Room. Great to be back. I know I missed you, but I had zero voice. I wish I had the voice to talk to you all last week, but I didn't. I just kept getting sicker and sicker, and I'm sure you can probably tell, I'm still a little nasally, but nonetheless, we're back. We're here. Thank you all for joining me. If you're new, welcome into the program. If you're not new, then welcome back, Locker Room faithful. Make sure you're following the Locker Room on our social medias, TLR Podcast 615 on our social medias. That is TLR Podcast 615 on our social media. Stay up to date with everything the Locker Room has going on. This episode is brought to you by FNX Fitness. Go to fnxfit.com, that is fnxfit.com, for all of your gym needs. From clothing, to supplements, to recoveries, to boosters, to gainers, to downers, to whatever basically you would ever be able to use in a gym. From the equipment to the clothing, FNX Fitness has you covered. Made here in the beautiful USA. And if you use your promo code TLRHOST, that is TLRHOST, all capitals, I'll go ahead and give you 15% off your first purchase. So much has happened since last we spoke, everybody. I mean, the college football coaching world has been shaken over, sideways, and under. Brian Kelly now at LSU, no longer at Notre Dame, is the almost 100%er. Lincoln Riley leaves the Oklahoma University and is now the head coach at USC. I mean, come on. It is getting crazy out there, folks. But this episode isn't about college football. Sadly, this episode really isn't about football, really isn't about basketball. This episode is about my top 5 UFC fighters of all time. And the only thing that really brought this up is I just kind of got inspired. I was talking to a couple of my friends, not to name drop here, but, Josh Parisian and, Miranda Maverick, UFC fighters that I'm friends with, no big deal. And I was just talking to them, and it really got me fired up for the UFC. Many of you know I love the UFC. In fact, a long time here on the program, we did an exclusive UFC show with Stephen Hines. And the only reason that's kind of gone away, folks, is because, and I've been talking to you about this, is we have a bunch of stuff coming for 2022, and just so excited. Got co-hosts. There's just so much. I don't want to give everything away because I'm going to start revealing it little by little come the Christmas season. But we have so much. And so, very excited about all that we have going on. Also, today is my birthday. And, I was just wanted to point that out there like a typical white girl. So that way you all could wish me happy birthday and I could feel good about myself. Also, when Starbucks says they give you a free drink for your birthday, they're full of crap. I mean, they do, but they really don't. It's not like they give you the smallest, crappiest version of the drink that you want. That's just a little side note that kind of made me mad this morning. But no, today's just it's a good day to talk about the UFC. Like I said, I had a bunch of really good conversations with actual UFC fighters, and we had been talking about our greatest of all time. And then they're like, why don't you just do a podcast on your greatest of all time? So that's what we're doing today. My top 5 greatest UFC fighters of all time. Let's get into my list. My number 1 greatest UFC fighter of all time, the greatest fighter of all time, Jon Jones. Jon Jones, for all his cocaine and heroin love, is without a doubt the scariest freak of nature I've ever seen in my life. I mean, Jon Jones, let's just give you his statistics real quick. 26, 1-0, 1 no contest. The youngest ever UFC champion at 23 years old. 11 title defenses. 11. Cleaned out the lightweight division. Literally not only cleaned out the lightweight division, ran the entire lightweight division back, cleaned it out again, and now Jon Jones is moving up to heavyweight to where he will already be probably we haven't seen him there yet, but probably be the best fighter in the heavyweight. And there's guys like Stipe Miocic, who is the greatest heavyweight of all time. Francis Ngannou. Like, you have guys like that are in their prime, can dominate at a moment's notice. And Jon Jones is so good that already moving up to heavyweight before he's had his first fight should be the second best ranked fighter in that division. First should always be your champion, Francis Ngannou. Then I would go Jon Jones over Stipe Miocic. From everything I've seen from Jon Jones in lightweight, he's better than Stipe Miocic. And Stipe Miocic is the greatest heavyweight of all time statistically. What makes Jon Jones such a unique fighter, what makes Jon Jones so incredibly hard to deal with, so incredibly hard to figure out, is that Jon Jones is 6'8", Jon Jones is 240 pounds, and he's LeBron James. He's LeBron James if LeBron James decided to go to the UFC. If LeBron James decided to become a UFC fighter, LeBron probably would have been one of the greatest, if not the greatest fighter of all time. There's something about a unique genetic ability like LeBron has, like Jon Jones has. Guys that are just crazy athletic for their size, crazy agile for their size, crazy strong for their size, crazy fast for their size, have the endurance like they do. These are just once in a lifetime, once in a generation type talents. And that's what Jon Jones was blessed with. His genetics. He's massive. He's got, a 75-inch reach, 76-inch reach. He is agile. He's nimble. His footwork is incredible. He's fast. He's got endurance. These guys come around once in a lifetime. He is the LeBron James of the UFC. Just a freak of nature athlete with an insane ability that he shouldn't have for the size that he is. Jon Jones' kicks are just as effective as his punches. And that's hard to do. A lot of the times, especially in the UFC, people that aren't dedicated to the UFC and watch it all the time, kicks are usually to set up your overhand. Kicks are usually to set up, what you're trying to work on up top. They're a distraction. Yes, they do hurt. And yes, if you chop at somebody's calf long enough or you chop at their thighs and keep hitting the same spot, you're definitely going to do damage to a person and weaken their legs. But then your finish is usually going to come from your hands. There's very few people in the UFC that are kick finishers. There's very few people in the UFC that are going to be able to utilize their kicks just as much as they can utilize their fists. And Jon Jones is that unique freak. He is just as deadly with his legs as he is his hands. He's a great wrestler. I don't think he gets enough credit for his wrestling. His takedown defense, and granted, it's because of his length, it's because of his size and strength that his takedown defense is so damn good. But he's just too hard to deal with. His elbows are insane. His knees are insane. Let's just put it this way. He beat Alexander Volkov, Gustafsson, DC Daniel Cormier, who most people consider in their top 5 all time, maybe top 6 all time fighters. He made him look like a child. That's how good Jon Jones is. Everybody he's faced, with his half-ass effort that he's put in, Jon Jones has made look like an amateur. Daniel Cormier is right up there in the discussion for greatest heavyweights of all time. And he not only dominated Daniel once, but he dominated Daniel twice. And this was Daniel looking as spry as he ever had been. Just dismantled him. I'm trying to get you to see the weight of this. That this guy is making people like DC, who is in and of itself one of the best guys to ever do it, made him look like he was nothing. That's how good Jon Jones is. I truly believe if Jon Jones decided to go to a different weight class like he is with heavyweight, we're going to see Jon Jones in heavyweight, that he will win that division too. He will dominate that division. He's too fast for those guys. Too nimble, too quick. That was Stipe Miocic's advantage for a long time in the heavyweight division. He was just too quick, too agile for those guys. He's a small heavyweight. Now, of course, Francis Ngannou is the scariest human being, I think, on planet Earth right now. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, just look up real life King Kong, because that's how strong and massive and freaking scary this guy is. And I think Jon Jones not only can beat Francis Ngannou kind of easily, I think as long as he avoids the big right hand from Francis, that Jones is just going to pick him apart. Too quick, too agile, too versatile. I mean, the guys that I'm talking about are top guys in the entire world. Guys that I'm talking about are top guys all time. And Jon Jones is just too good. So Jon Jones is my number one. I think, if, like I said, you put him in any division, lightweight, light heavyweight, heavyweight, I think Jon Jones would dominate any division. If he decided, if he were to fight Israel Adesanya, if he were to fight any of the great guys in these divisions now, Jon Jones is winning. At his age. He's just, I've never seen anybody this skilled, anybody this diverse in what he can do in mixed martial arts. So Jon Jones is my number one. My number two, Mr. George St. Pierre himself. This is a lot of like the Jordan LeBron debates, where it's like, I think it's very interchangeable. There's going to be guys that are ride or die with Jon Jones, which would be me. And there's going to be guys that are ride or die with George St. Pierre, which are a lot of you. I know Steve Hines is probably one of those people as well. George St. Pierre is, it's kind of scary how almost identical he is to Jon Jones. 26-2, welterweight and middleweight champion 2 times. Of course, a UFC Hall of Famer. But what's so impressive about George St. Pierre is that George St. Pierre dominated his fights. Much like Jon Jones, I might add. George St. Pierre was just, he would take what you did, and this is what was so freaking crazy about it all, is he would take what you did best. Let's say you were great, on ground and pound. He would take what you did best and beat you at your own game. Like, do you know how savage you have to be to go, hey, listen, you're great at ground and pound. So guess what? I'm going to take you to the ground, and I'm going to pound you, and I'm going to dominate this entire fight. Whatever you do best, I'm going to beat you at whatever you do best. Just for the hell of it. That's how good George St. Pierre was. I encourage you, if you've never seen him fight, truly, go watch George St. Pierre highlights on YouTube. Man was a monster. And you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, too. If you there used to be a guy on YouTube that broke down a lot of this stuff, and I can't remember his name, so please forgive me, but he broke down a lot of George St. Pierre's fights, and he would, do the whole rundown of who he was fighting, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about if you can find these videos. Maybe I can see if I can find them and throw them up on the Instagram page this week. But what he would do is he literally would just take whatever the other guy did really well and just use it against him. It's crazy when you see the videos and they break it down for you and they show you. I'll see if I can get the link posted up to my Instagram at some point this week. But it's crazy. And the guy's pointing out, he's like, all right, well, he's fighting XYZ, and XYZ was an amazing kickboxer. So George St. Pierre comes out and becomes the best kickboxer in the entire octagon that night. That's how dominant he was. And like I said, that's where I think the Jordan-LeBron debate comes in with George St. Pierre, Jon Jones. Now, they both have their flaws. Jon Jones had drug problems. George St. Pierre has an extra loss on his record, or has 2 losses on his record. LeBron versus Jordan. LeBron's lost in the finals. Jordan's never lost in the finals. But I think both have very strong arguments every which way. I mean, George St. Pierre was just such a unique fighter. and was so dominant when he fought that it's hard to. I mean, he's like, I would honestly compare him to Michael, because I'm a LeBron's the greatest of all time, so that would mean Jon Jones is my guy, and so just to keep my list to keep matching up here, he is like Michael Jordan, dominant as can be, so dominant to the point for Khabib Nurmagomedov, even though I don't believe he's in my top 5, is one of those guys where he was so dominant when he fought that it was almost impossible to not just be like, well, this is just unfair. Well, that was George St Pierre. Just unfair. So like I said, this one's tough, and I think it's going to be a lot of people's 1 and 2s flip-flopped, just very much like the Jordan-LeBron discussion, but George St Pierre lands at number 2. At number 3 for me, another very, very, very tough decision. But I went with Anderson Silva. I know he's got 11 losses on his record, but he also has 34 wins. What was so impressive about Anderson Silva genuinely might be the greatest combat athlete of all time. I mean, look at him in the boxing world. Well, I don't think we've ever seen a guy like Anderson Silva that has translated from boxing to the UFC so seamlessly. I mean, Anderson Silva's just, he's dominating in boxing, let's put it that way. And I'm not joking. And he's not fighting like these fake people like Jake Paul is, which we're going to talk about him and Tommy Fury later. He's not fighting, washed up guy of the week. He's fighting real guys that are active in the sport of boxing and dominating. I mean, Dana White, I think, actually said that. Dana White said that Anderson Silva might be the greatest combat athlete of all time. And he very well might be. It's hard for me to go against that from Dana White. From the boxing realm to the UFC octagon to everything he did in Brazil to kickboxing to jiu-jitsu. I mean, this dude's just a once-in-a-lifetime guy as well. Now, he was dismantled, I think, because of his disgusting injury. And for those of you who don't know what injury it was, his leg snapped in half. Not snapped in half. It disintegrated in half. You know, like when you have a toothpick and you snap it over your fingers? That's what his leg did against a human. Yeah. So when you're coming off a traumatic injury like that, which we're about to actually see Conor McGregor do the exact same thing, it's going to be very interesting to see how that affects you. And Anderson Silva, while of course we definitely never saw the same Anderson Silva that we knew and loved before that, Anderson Silva was still a good fighter, still won fights. I mean, now, like I said, in the boxing world, Anderson Silva's just doing great. But I mean, Anderson Silva, besides the amount of accolades he has, he's the longest reigning defending champion of all time. Think about this. He defended his belt 2,457 times? Or 257 times. That would be very impressive. I meant 2,457 days. Still crazy. Still a crazy record, don't get me wrong. But that's how dominant Anderson Silva was in his prime. I mean, anybody that can be good at something long enough to hold on to it for 2,000 plus days is in my top 5. I don't care if it was held in a fart for 2,000 days. If you can do anything for 2,000 days at a high level, listen, I'm all for it. So perhaps the most dominant reign of any UFC fighter of all time during his prime. And like I said, the sad part is him being barred by injury. But I mean, there was just nothing like Anderson Silva on prime fight night. Anderson Silva was one of the most elusive guys you've ever seen. And you're seeing that in boxing, by the way. You're seeing him float like a butterfly and sting like a bee in boxing. But in the UFC, I mean, you never saw anybody do what he did. I mean, even the Diaz brothers who did do stuff like that, where they would put their hands down and kind of dodge punches, they would still get clipped a couple times while they're dodging it. I mean, I've seen Anderson Silva have trained killers throw punches and kicks at him as hard as they can and just whiff on every single one. That's how crazy Anderson Silva was. He was Neo from the Matrix. Like, legit. So between his title defense for over 2,000 days, between his dominance in his prime, what he's doing outside of the octagon, when it comes to boxing, and I know I can't take that into the account because that's not a part of the UFC greatest of all time, but nonetheless, let's take out boxing, even though I really want to bring it in because this is about the only time I give a damn about boxing is when Anderson Silva's doing it, or Tyson Fury, or in a couple of weeks when, oh goodness, why am I blanking out on Tyson Fury's younger brother's name? Tommy Fury. Good grief. When Tommy Fury beats Jake Paul here in a couple weeks, Jake Paul, no one likes you. I refrain myself there, guys. I'm try to keep it as PG as possible. But take the boxing out of it. Anderson Silva's the third best UFC fighter in my book. Next up at number 4, give me Stipe Miocic. Let's put the UFC aside. Stipe Miocic is an amazing man. And I don't mean that in a weird way. Okay, let me emphasize why he's an amazing man. So Stipe Miocic is a full-time firefighter who doesn't ask for special privileges, works the weekends, scrubs the fire trucks, and lives a normal life in his hometown being a fireman. Now, I know a lot of people with the controversy of some, fighters needing money and some fighters having to work at Texas Roadhouse because they don't have enough money to fight and work at, and just live off of that salary. So is this one of those situations? No. This isn't a situation where Stipe Miocic needs money. Stipe Miocic is arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time. I think he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. Statistically, he's the greatest heavyweight of all time. 4 title defenses, 2-time heavyweight champion of the entire world. Stipe Miocic is just one of those guys who has knockout power. He's agile, reminds me a little bit of Jon Jones. He was quicker than these big guys. He was smaller than these big guys, and he was knocking people out like these big guys. That was what was so impressive with Stipe Miocic. So his resume speaks for himself. And he's got the money. Stipe Miocic has been paid. He's had the pay-per-views. He's had his big title defenses. He's had his massive fights. Do you think Stipe Miocic needs to be a full-time firefighter? No. He does it because he's that great of a human. I mean, he's a great family man too. You see he's very active. But I mean, even when I watched the full interview with like his firehouse, they're like, dude, this guy works like anybody else would at the firehouse. He does his midnight shifts. He, cleans the gear when he needs to. It's so easy for a guy like that to, do a fire, do the fire stuff, but only do it, during the day when it's convenient. Or do the fireman stuff and, just kind of do the easy stuff. Go out, just go out and put out the fires whenever he feels like it. Flex his special privileges. I don't work on weekends. I'm Stipe Miocic. I'm a millionaire, greatest heavyweight of all time. I'm Stipe Miocic. Yeah, I don't need to clean the fire trucks. No, he doesn't do that. It's so easy for him to do that too. And I'm sure, honestly, if he asked, if he said, hey, listen, I'm not going to clean the fire truck. Like, I'm Stipe. I'm a heavyweight champion in the world. I'm not going to clean the truck. I'm sure they'd be like, oh, okay. That's fair. That makes sense. You're Stipe Miocic. We'll probably just leave you alone. But no. And he says it. He says it all the time in interviews. Like, I just want to be another one of the guys. I just want to be treated like the guys. I don't want any special privileges. I don't want to not have to do what they all have to do. And I respect that so much. Hell, if that was me, it's pretty hard for me to be like, yeah, I guess I'll do the midnight shift this week. I'd be like, nah, bruh. Do you know, I'm Stipe Miocic. You're doing the midnight shift. So all that being said, he's an amazing man. Great family guy. Fire department, town hero. Oh, and also the greatest heavyweight of all time. And like I said, Stipe was that unique blend of, he didn't have the crazy massive size, but he did have the crazy power. Like, Stipe can knock people out. But for a heavyweight, and for a lot of the heavyweights he was fighting, he was usually undersized. And so he used that to his advantage instead of disadvantage. He said, all right, I'm going to be quicker than them. I'm going to hit just as hard as they do, but I'm going to be able to get the hell out of the way when they try and swing back. And that's what's so amazing about Stipe's game, and why I have Stipe as my fourth greatest fighter of all time. His unique blend of athleticism, the way he was able to manipulate the heavyweight division to his advantage, where it very easily could have been a bunch of disadvantages, and we could have seen him down at light heavyweight, or lightweight even. I don't know if he could have gotten down to lightweight, but definitely light heavyweight. It'd be probably a whole lot easier for him to go down there. Instead, he stays up with the big boys, dominates the division, fourth greatest fighter of all time. And finally, at number 5, give me Conor McGregor. Is that a decent Irish accent? Oh, Conor McGregor. It feels very Lucky Charms-ish. That maybe even sounds a little Shrek-like too. Donkey. He's not like that. He's more like a, hey, who the frick is this guy? Something like that. Like, yeah, he uses the F word a lot. Who the frick is this guy? No, that still sounds Lucky Charms. Listen, I'll work on my Conor McGregor accent, and I'll get back to you. But yeah, Conor McGregor, 5th greatest fighter in my book of all time. The quickest ever knockout in UFC history in 13 seconds. The first ever champ. Created champ. Fought across 3 different weight divisions. Will Conor McGregor ever get back to his reign? I don't know. I've kind of lost faith in Conor over his last couple of fights because he keeps losing a bunch in a row. But we'll see after he comes back off of this injury, which looks like around April, maybe. So the story of Conor McGregor is, I think, a little bit more amazing of a legend than he already is. But Conor McGregor was just this, weighed nothing fighter who lived basically off of the streets. And the only way he got to where he was today is because of his mouth. And I know his mouth gets him into a lot of trouble. He says a lot of stuff that, hey, even where I'm just like, all right, Conor. I'm a Conor nut rider through and through. But when Conor McGregor says stuff about, people's wives dying or, sleeping with other people's wives, like he gets intense. I mean, Khabib Nurmagomedov and his entire gang of thugs literally jumped the cage, and they all tried to kill each other when he fought Khabib the first time. Like, legit, his mouth almost got him killed. But that's what made Conor McGregor who he is today. You see, Conor McGregor, I heard the story about Dana White goes over to see him fight. He was basically nothing special. He was just he was a decent fighter. But there's a lot of decent fighters, and the UFC was pushing personalities. They needed people to push themselves. They needed people to promote themselves. So what did Conor McGregor do? He made himself the most promotable man in history. He made himself Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson of the UFC. He made himself the people's champ. He made himself the people's favorite. He made himself the people's most hated. He made himself the people's person. Dunder Mifflin, the people's person, paper people, sorry. But that's what he did. All with his mouth. What's so remarkable is he literally talked his way into the UFC. He literally talked his way into getting title shots. And then he backed it up with the most dangerous left hand in history. He's the first ever double champ. We'll probably never see another double champ. Israel Adesanya got his butt kicked and lost his other belt. It's so remarkable what a double champ can do. I mean, lightweight, middleweight, or no, is it lightweight, featherweight? Yeah, middleweight, I think. Are the divisions that he just running up and down. Conor McGregor is such a unique fighter. Such a unique person. His story is incredible. Literally used his mouth to get him to where he is today. But the reason he lands at number 5 for me is he has the most deadly left hand in all of UFC history. His reign is not over. I still believe we have a push for a belt in Conor McGregor left yet. And I think Conor McGregor being the double champ, being the fastest ever knockout in UFC history, all of those accolades together make him my 5th greatest fighter of all time. Well, there you have it. Another episode is in the books. If you enjoyed this program, make sure you share it with a friend. Follow The Locker Room on social media, TLR Podcast 615. Let the show know how it's doing. Let us know how you like it. Listen, I missed you guys. I'm glad we're back. Once again, I'm Jacob Courtwright. This is The Locker Room.